There are moments in life when the world speaks so softly that most people never hear it. The trees may still stand, the sky may still appear calm, and the air may feel no different against the skin, yet something deep within the atmosphere begins to change. It is not the kind of change that announces itself with thunder at first. It is the kind that arrives in silence. And sometimes it is that silence that carries the greatest warning. Across the world, advanced storm sensors have been watching the skies in ways human eyes never could. These instruments do not simply measure rain or wind. They listen to pressure shifts, temperature drops, moisture patterns, and the hidden movement of energy inside clouds. Day after day they collect signals from the atmosphere, piecing together a story that no ordinary forecast can fully reveal. Recently, those sensors detected something that has caused many experts to pause. It was not just another storm pattern. It was a sudden and unusual transformation in the structure of developing systems, a change so subtle that it could easily have been missed without the newest technology. What makes this discovery unsettling is not only what was found, but how quickly it happened. In past years, dangerous storm systems often built themselves gradually. They were signs people could recognize. The air grew heavier, the clouds darkened over hours, winds shifted in familiar ways. Communities often had enough time to prepare. But the newest sensor readings suggest that some storms are no longer following that slower path. Instead, they are intensifying in far shorter periods, sometimes within minutes, transforming from ordinary weather into severe threats before many people even realize what is happening. Scientists have observed sharp bursts of internal energy rising through storm cells at rates rarely seen before. These bursts create stronger rotation, faster wind acceleration, and heavier rainfall in compressed windows of time. In simple terms, storms are becoming more unpredictable. They are not only arriving stronger, they are changing character while already in motion. What begins as a mild weather event can become something far more dangerous before traditional warning systems can fully catch up. This silent shift may be connected to larger changes happening across the planet. Warmer oceans release more moisture into the air. Rising global temperatures create instability in regions that once remained relatively predictable. Seasonal boundaries are becoming blurred. Places that rarely faced violent storms are beginning to experience unusual weather. Areas that once had clear warning patterns are now seeing systems behave in unfamiliar ways. The atmosphere is no longer moving according to the old rules many relied upon. For many people, weather has always felt like background noise in daily life. It is something checked quickly on a phone before leaving the house. But these new findings remind us that weather is not just a routine detail. It is a living force, constantly changing, constantly responding to a planet under stress. And when the tools designed to watch that force begin detecting patterns they did not expect, it deserves our attention. The most chilling part is that nature rarely shouts before it changes. Often it whispers first. A slight pressure drop, a hidden thermal surge, a shift in moisture invisible to the human eye. These are the quiet signals now being captured by the latest storm sensor. They are revealing that the atmosphere may be entering a new phase, one where the line between normal and dangerous becomes thinner than ever before. And perhaps the lesson in all of this is not to live in fear of the sky, but to respect what it is telling us. Because sometimes the most powerful warnings do not come with sirens. Sometimes they come in silence, carried through invisible currents, waiting for those willing to listen. Storm sensors detected a hidden atmospheric change. Advanced weather sensors recently discovered subtle but unusual shifts inside storm systems that ordinary observation could not see. Across the modern world, weather monitoring has reached a level of precision that was once unimaginable. What used to depend on human observation, basic radar, and general forecasting models has now evolved into a deeply sensitive network of storm sensors, spread across land, sea, and atmosphere. These instruments do far more than simply detect rain or wind. They measure shifts in air pressure down to extremely fine levels, track temperature variations across microregions of the sky, and analyze the internal structure of cloud systems as they form. Because of this, they are able to notice changes that are completely invisible to the human eye and often beyond traditional forecasting tools. Recently, these advanced systems have revealed something unexpected inside developing weather patterns. At first glance, the atmosphere appeared normal. Cloud formations were consistent with seasonal expectations, and there were no immediate signs of extreme weather. However, the sensors began recording subtle irregularities deep within storm cells and surrounding air layers. These irregularities were not dramatic enough to trigger alarms on their own, but when analyzed together, they pointed toward a meaningful shift in atmospheric behavior. One of the most significant discoveries was the presence of uneven energy distribution inside storm systems. Instead of forming in a balanced and predictable structure, energy was accumulating in concentrated bursts in certain parts of the atmosphere, while leaving other areas unusually calm. This imbalance suggested that storms were beginning to organize themselves differently than in the past. It was as if the internal architecture of weather systems was changing shape, forming new patterns that do not match historical data. And another important observation came from moisture dynamics. Storm sensors detected rapid and uneven moisture clustering in regions where it was not expected. This meant that water vapor was not spreading and condensing in the usual gradual manner. Instead, it was gathering in sudden pockets, creating conditions where storms could intensify more quickly than normal. These moisture surges, although small in isolation, were significant when viewed as part of a larger atmospheric shift. Even more concerning was the change in air pressure gradients. Normally, pressure differences develop steadily, allowing weather systems to evolve in a predictable timeline. But the latest readings showed sharper and more abrupt pressure contrasts forming inside storm zones. This kind of behavior often acts as a trigger for rapid intensification, where calm conditions can suddenly transform to severe weather within a short period of time. What makes these findings especially important is not just the data itself, but what it represents. It suggests that the atmosphere may be entering a phase where familiar forecasting patterns are no longer fully reliable on their own. The storms themselves are not simply becoming stronger, they are becoming more complex in their internal behavior. This complexity is what makes detection both crucial and challenging. These hidden changes do not always translate immediately into visible weather events. Instead, they build quietly beneath the surface of the atmosphere, like signals waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Without advanced sensors, these shifts would likely go unnoticed until the moment they manifest as sudden and powerful storms. In essence, what the latest storm sensors have revealed is a deeper layer of atmospheric activity that has always existed, but was never before visible at this level of detail. It is a reminder that the sky above is far more dynamic and intricate than it appears from the ground, and that even the calmest horizon may be holding silent changes in motion long before they become visible to everyone below. Storms are intensifying much faster than before. Some storms are now growing from mild to dangerous within minutes, reducing the time available for warnings and preparation. One of the most striking findings emerging from the latest storm sensor data is how dramatically the timing of storm intensification appears to be changing. In earlier decades, storm development followed a relatively observable rhythm. Weather systems would form, gather strength over hours or even days, and gradually reveal their severity through visible signs, such as darkening skies, steady pressure drops, and widening wind fields. This slower evolution allowed meteorologists to track patterns and provide warnings with a reasonable buffer of time. However, recent sensor readings suggest that this familiar rhythm is no longer as reliable as it once was. What the data is showing now is a form of rapid escalation that challenges long-standing expectations. Instead of gradually building intensity, some storm systems are undergoing sudden internal transformations. Within a very short time frame, conditions that appear mild and manageable can shift into highly unstable and potentially dangerous states. This acceleration is not always visible on the surface at first. The sky may still look deceptively calm, while deep within the cloud structure, powerful changes are already taking place. This hidden development is what makes the phenomenon particularly concerning. The sensors have recorded instances where wind speeds inside developing storm cells increase sharply in compressed intervals, rather than through gradual strengthening. In some cases, pressure systems that would traditionally take hours to destabilize are now shifting within minutes. These rapid changes create a situation where the window for early warning becomes significantly shorter. By the time surface level indicators appear, the storm may already have reached a more advanced stage of intensity than expected. This pattern of quick intensification also affects rainfall behavior. Instead of steady and predictable precipitation, storms are beginning to produce concentrated bursts of heavy rainfall over short durations. This can overwhelm natural drainage systems and create localized flooding conditions with little advance notice. The unpredictability of these rainfall surges adds another layer of complexity to forecasting efforts, as traditional models are built around slower, more evenly distributed weather development. Scientists analyzing these readings are particularly focused on the internal structure of storm systems. The data suggests that energy is being reorganized more efficiently within the atmosphere, allowing storms to tighten and strengthen more quickly than before. This internal efficiency means that once certain thresholds are reached, the storm can escalate rapidly, almost as if it is responding to a trigger rather than following a gradual progression. Another factor contributing to this rapid change is the instability in surrounding atmospheric conditions. When warm, moisture-rich air interacts with cooler layers above, the resultant imbalance can act as a catalyst for sudden storm development. If these conditions align in just the right way, the transition from mild weather to severe activity can occur much faster than traditional forecasting timelines anticipate. What makes this especially significant is the impact it has on preparedness. Emergency systems, infrastructure planning, and public response strategies are often designed around the assumption of gradual escalation. When storms intensify too quickly, that assumption is challenged. Communities may find themselves with less time to react, adjust, or implement safety measures. In essence, the latest sensor findings are not simply showing that storms are becoming stronger, but that they are becoming faster in their transformation. This shift in timing changes the entire nature of how weather risk is understood. It emphasizes that the atmosphere is not only powerful, but also increasingly dynamic, capable of changing state in ways that compress time itself between warning and impact. Traditional weather patterns are changing. Storms are no longer following familiar seasonal behavior, making forecasting more difficult for experts. And another important layer revealed by the latest storm sensor data is how dramatically the internal structure of weather systems is becoming more complex and less predictable than in previous years. Storms have always been dynamic, but what is now being observed goes beyond ordinary variation. Instead of forming in relatively stable and layered structures, many storm systems are beginning to show fragmented and rapidly shifting internal patterns. These patterns suggest that energy, moisture, and temperature are no longer organizing in the traditional way meteorologists have relied on for decades. In a typical storm system, there is usually a clear progression of development. Warm air rises, moisture condenses, clouds build vertically, and rotational forces gradually strengthen if conditions allow. This process creates a somewhat predictable structure that can be tracked over time. However, the newest sensor readings indicate that this structure is becoming less uniform. Instead of a smooth vertical development, storms are now showing multiple competing zones of activity within the same system. These zones can behave independently, intensifying or weakening at different rates without following a single coordinated pattern. One of the most notable findings is the presence of what researchers describe as internal energy fragmentation. Rather than a storm acting as one unified system, it is increasingly behaving like several smaller systems interacting within a shared space. This fragmentation leads to sudden shifts in storm behavior, where one part of the system may calm while another rapidly intensifies. This makes it far more difficult to predict the overall direction of the storm, as its behavior is no longer governed by a single dominant flow. Moisture distribution also plays a key role in this changing structure. Instead of spreading evenly throughout the storm, moisture is being pulled into concentrated clusters that form and dissolve unpredictably. These clusters act as temporary engines of intensity, fueling sudden bursts of rainfall and wind activity. Because they can appear and disappear quickly, they introduce a level of volatility that traditional forecasting models struggle to capture in real time. Temperature layering within storm systems is also showing unusual behavior. In stable systems, temperature gradients tend to form in relatively consistent layers, helping maintain predictable movement of air masses. But recent sensor data shows disrupted layering, where warm and cool zones overlap in irregular ways. This disruption can lead to unstable pockets of air that accelerate storm development unexpectedly. It also contributes to the difficulty in determining how a storm will evolve over time, as the internal environment is constantly shifting. Wind dynamics inside these systems are becoming equally complex. Instead of steady directional flows, sensors are detecting swirling microcurrents moving in multiple directions within the same storm cell. These internal wind variations can amplify or counteract each other, creating unpredictable bursts of strength in certain areas while leaving others temporarily subdued. This uneven behavior adds another layer of uncertainty for forecasting models that rely on more consistent wind patterns. All of these factors combined suggest that storms are no longer simply growing in size or strength, they are evolving in structure. They are becoming more fragmented, more internally active, and more difficult to map using traditional methods. This structural shift does not just affect how storms are understood scientifically, but also how they are monitored and predicted in real-world scenarios. The most important implication of this discovery is that forecasting must now account for complexity at a much deeper level than before. It is no longer enough to track a storm as a single entity. Instead, it must be analyzed as a collection of interacting systems, each capable of changing independently and rapidly influencing the whole. This represents a fundamental shift in how atmospheric behavior is interpreted and highlights just how much remains to be learned about the evolving patterns of the sky above. Global climate changes may be influencing storms, warmer oceans, and rising temperatures are creating more unstable atmospheric conditions that can fuel stronger storms. One of the most concerning aspects revealed by the latest storm sensor observations is the increasing unpredictability in how storms transition from early formation into fully developed systems. In the past, meteorologists relied on recognizable stages of development that allowed them to estimate both timing and severity with a reasonable degree of confidence. But recent data suggests that these stages are becoming less distinct. Instead of moving through a clear sequence, storms are now showing irregular jumps between phases, sometimes skipping expected steps entirely and accelerating directly into advanced states of intensity. This irregular progression creates a significant challenge for forecasting accuracy. When a storm does not follow a consistent developmental path, it becomes difficult to determine its next stage of evolution. The sensors have recorded multiple instances where systems appeared relatively weak and disorganized only to reorganize rapidly into highly structured and powerful formations within a very short period. This type of transformation suggests that the internal mechanisms driving storm development are becoming more efficient at reorganizing energy, allowing systems to self-correct into stronger configurations much faster than before. Another important factor contributing to this unpredictability is the interaction between local and regional atmospheric conditions. Storm systems do not exist in isolation. They are influenced by surrounding air masses, ocean temperatures, and broader climate patterns. The latest readings indicate that these external influences are becoming more variable and less stable. For example, sudden shifts in temperature between neighboring regions can create sharp boundaries in the atmosphere, which act as triggers for rapid storm intensification. When these boundaries form unexpectedly, they can disrupt even well-established forecasts. Humidity fluctuations are also playing a larger role than previously understood. Instead of following gradual increases or decreases, moisture levels in the atmosphere are now showing abrupt spikes and drops within short time intervals. These fluctuations can feed directly into developing storm systems, providing sudden bursts of energy that accelerate their growth. In some cases, a relatively dry environment can transition quickly into a moisture-rich zone, creating conditions that favor explosive storm development. Wind shear patterns are another area where significant changes have been observed. Wind shear, which refers to changes in wind speed and direction at different altitudes, is a critical factor in determining storm organization. Stable shear conditions typically support predictable storm structures, while unstable shear can lead to disorganization or rapid intensification. The new sensor data shows that wind shear is becoming more erratic, shifting unexpectedly even within the same storm system. This inconsistency makes it harder to determine whether a storm will weaken or strengthen as it evolves. What is particularly notable is that silent warnings can be the most dangerous. The atmosphere often shows small invisible signals before major weather events, reminding people to pay closer attention to nature's quiet changes.